If you're watching our show online, it's very likely on YouTube, and it was made possible by our guest today. He created what's become the world's second largest website, this one with his friends, but has since branched out into other ventures and adventures, including launching an AI-driven fintech company, becoming a dad, and moving his family to Taipei, where he was born. Steve Chen, YouTube co-founder, mentor, and early-stage investor. Thank you so much for coming to our studios and being on this program.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today.
Absolutely our pleasure. Let's go back to the early days first, and then we're going to come back to what's happening right now. But you left university as a young student to work in Silicon Valley. Had you even graduated by then?
No, it was, and that's a great question, right? I think it was the last semester that I was there. It was in 2019. And that came down to, a decision between just me versus parents, but also just me versus the other side of me, which is like, this is not the right, it's kind of an erratic decision to be leaving the university when you have just a few months left.
Especially as an Asian.
Especially as an Asian, right? And, but that opportunity there was, I think, and this plays out time and time again, is the timing of that PayPal opportunity, that one-way flight to go from the Midwest in Chicago to fly to Silicon Valley to join a budding startup, that opportunity was certainly not going to be there in a few months' time, right? And so I worked it out. I gotta say, that it was a logical decision to say that the worst case, this doesn't work out, I can always return and finish that degree. But worst case, if I miss this opportunity, it'll no longer be there. So let's take that unique opportunity, seize upon it when it's available, and then see how it works out. And if it doesn't work out, we'll come back to finishing that degree. Parents never agreed. I think still to this day, they never agreed.
Yeah, I can imagine. But you seized that opportunity and it worked out. Looking at what the ecosystem is today, particularly one, opportunities, two, the way educational, those degrees and that certification has become so important in job search. Do you think that young people can make that same kind of decision as you now? Would you have made the same kind of decision if you were graduating in 2026?
I think there are a few different perspectives on this, right? Because you have programs like a Teal Fellowship that even at an earlier age, encourages young kids, if they have an idea, to really seize upon that opportunity and be able to get the backing. And obviously it has shown that it has demonstrated time and time again that it works and people are able to be successful. But I know that personally, when I am giving advice, whether that's to my own kids, whether that is entrepreneurs, or I think more importantly are the entrepreneurs want-to-bes, like they're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, but they're wondering, when do I take that first step? I still do think that it's important to work for, to get some, the educational part is important, but I think a key element, part of that is those few years that I spent in Silicon Valley, being in between when I first moved out there to before forming the first startup. And it's really working for a startup, but working for a company, and then doing either the team management, collaborating with other people, being able to disagree, but then still be able to move forward, being able to have a group of people with 20, 30 people in the room and being able to be unified on a decision even though everybody feels differently. All these things, they're not lessons that are taught in the typical classroom. And I think that that's really those are the lessons that I think you learn at working for a larger company after you do release after release, product ideas from an idea phase to building it out, to design, to release, to testing, and then seeing what the actual customers think. A lot of these are lessons that are learned, I think, only available to be learned at a larger company. And then I think it's taking that experience and in some time in their lives, being able to take that experience and putting it into work, into a personal idea that they have.
So in a nutshell, if your kid came up to you and said, I'm graduating in 6 months, but hey, I want to head across the country for this possible opportunity, this startup that nobody really knows about in an industry that's really nascent. Is that okay, Dad?
It would be, I know that this may sound a little bit conflicting because this is something that I did, but no. Please finish. Please spend a few years working for a larger company. But I do encourage them at some time, if they do have an idea, to be able to just not give up that idea in spite of what maybe their close circle of friends or the community actually says. I do encourage them to be able to have that confidence that if you really believe in the idea, it's better to, even if the idea doesn't work out, I still think that it's a much better experience and route to take to try that idea and to know that it didn't work out and to see that in person, rather than kind of living almost every day in regret to say, what if I did that and it did work out? Kind of, or months later or years later to look back and maybe even see an identical idea really flourishing and saying, darn, I wish I did something at that point. Yeah.
You mentioned the Thiel Fellowship, and just for context, that's from Peter Thiel, who was one of the first PayPal employees along with you. You were among the first 10 employees at PayPal in 1999, and that was before the dot-com bubble burst.
Yeah.
Yet, PayPal survived and even thrived during that period. But taking the lessons you learned from that period and to what we're seeing right now, what parallels would you draw with what's happening in the AI space, with many saying that what we're seeing, and with so many entrepreneurs and companies jumping on that AI bandwagon, are we seeing a similar kind of bubble?
Yeah, I think it's hard to, the speed in which AI is completely taking off since 2021, 2022 with ChatGPT and OpenAI, it's astonishing. But you're right, it draws parallels to that first wave of internet products from 1996 with Netscape, kind of with Yahoo, with eBay, some of those services launching. And then in 1999, when I moved to Silicon Valley, that was just months before the dot-com crash. And so I stayed at PayPal from 1999 to 2005, which is when we started YouTube. Through that phase, it was on an individual level, and then I think on a more Silicon Valley level. Silicon Valley went through that dot-com crash, and the impacts of that was that it was much harder to get fundraising. And so almost guaranteed fundraising, even for a company like PayPal, was all of a sudden retracted, that we're not going to, it's going to be much more difficult, much more challenging for VCs to be able to write these checks. And it's partially because the actual investors inside the VCs, they're not seeing the right exits, because they're seeing these exits of these companies that have gone public just plummet in price. And so I think there was a lot more push towards, but this is happening within a 24-hour overnight time frame of, the strategy of PayPal was just growth, and we'll always be able to figure out how to pay for this by fundraising again. Suddenly, 24 hours later, that changes to, we're not going to fundraise again. We need to be able to figure out how to be able to compensate for this growth, compensate for the scalability, for the growth of the team, for the growth of the product from the operation side. All of that, we need to figure out how to make that embedded into a monetization model into the product. And so there were a lot of decisions like that about all of a sudden promising users a free payment system forever to one, you have to monetize it. So it was overnight starting to actually charge for these business accounts and starting to charge for the transactions when you start receiving them. And then also trying to figure out with the best market, what the actual best platform that a payment solution could be built on top of. And then I think both of those two fronts, I think that the monetization strategy worked out. And then two, that was when PayPal started really making a lot more of the products and services for eBay, for auctions. And that was kind of a natural fit where a lot of these auctions, they would end. And then the one missing link there was at the end of every auction, a payment needs to be made before the auction item could be shipped, and there was no way to be able to do that. I think people were still sending, checks and then mailing it, and so to be able to have an instant transfer that can automatically take money from my credit card or my bank account and put it into your account, that was a lifesaver for eBay. But I mean, it took a lot of time, and all throughout that phase, PayPal went public, it went IPO, it went through an acquisition with eBay that then that didn't work out. And so, I mean, through that sort of 5-6 years period, while in one sense it was a long period, it also gave me the hands-on education to be able to see what is it like to be able to go through that dot-com crash? What is it like to start talking to the investors when they have differing thoughts overnight? What is it like to go public, go through an acquisition like eBay and PayPal? That was certainly something that we thought of when we were talking to Google at the same time. So I think for me, that was so important to go through those 5-6 years. And I think if I have to say, if I didn't go through those 5-6 years at PayPal and at eBay, even if in 2005, the same group of us came together in that garage to come up with the idea of YouTube, I don't think I would have had the confidence to take the most important step, that first step, to say, okay, why don't we give it a shot? I think it was through those 5-6 years, and I will say also that it's not only me, but there was a whole group of us that came from PayPal that ended up creating something around that same time, around 2005, with LinkedIn that was created, with a lot of Tesla and a lot of the things that Elon was doing, a lot of the stuff with Yelp and all the things that Peter's created, David Sachs, and that whole PayPal Mafia group. I think we all came out of PayPal thinking, okay, well, if we have that idea, now we have the confidence to give it a shot.
Yeah, it's actually really amazing, especially when you look at the first few employees of PayPal and what's been created since. I mean, you could just throw companies out there in the New York Stock Exchange, and basically it's right up there at the top. You mentioned something interesting, and particularly with PayPal and the synergy it found with eBay. And I believe YouTube did the same thing in the early days with MySpace, kind of finding that captive customer base. Nowadays, do you think that should be a huge part of, or how much of a strategy should that be for a company that's starting up now?
I agree, right? I think that the success, especially early stage companies, there are a few very important check boxes. And I think that I was the chief technical officer at PayPal. And so my focus was a lot on, or my day job focus was focused on working on building out what were some of the first at the time when YouTube launched. So this ability to be able to take videos that were created on any digital camera or any of these webcams or any of these devices, and they can come in through, I think it was a combination of 120 different video codecs, 200 plus different type of audio codecs, and you can actually merge them together to form a video. But there was only one codec that was compatible within the browser. And so things like that, where you have to take in all these different codecs to be able to identify, to be able to transcode, be able to distribute it to different video streaming servers around the world. This was, again, before cloud, before Amazon Cloud, AWS, any of these services were. So back then, I mean, to just even get these data centers up and running, you had to be there on Sunday mornings when the trucks came to bring out your 42U racks of machines. You had to be the one that takes each of these machines upstairs and then plug in each of the Ethernet cables, making sure that everything, you have to do the installation of everything, all the hardware and software you have to do and maintain and operate yourself. And there's a lot of this, like the transcoding, the ability to be able to watch the videos inside a browser without having to download something, the ability to be able to take a video that you see on YouTube and to be able to embed that video player onto other sites, on third-party sites, and they would be able to stream that video from YouTube. So I think there's that element, and I would say those are all still technical checkboxes. Like, they were mandatory requirements that had to be built, or else YouTube would not be possible. But even then, so we started working on YouTube in 2005, around February 2005. those main achievements from the technical side were ready to go by May 2005. So about 3 months later, we were ready to go with the product and we launched YouTube, and a week goes by, no video gets uploaded, right? And I think like that's when we realized that aside from the technical side of it, and many companies run into this where they have a great technical team, they can build out a technical product, but there's still this product market fit. It's about figuring out, especially for a consumer product like YouTube versus an enterprise or a B2B service, it is trying to find, well, what's the use case that the consumer is going to want? This is still 3 years before the iPhone came out, right? So it still wasn't that easy, in spite of everything that YouTube did to make it easier. It was still taking a video camera, going out, making a video, going back home, connecting it to the computer, uploading it, and then sharing that video afterwards. And so it was trying to figure out, so what audiences are going to use this? When we first launched YouTube, that first week, we thought it was going to be more of a dating service, a dating site that the people were going to do personal.
It's funny how so many huge companies now started off with the intention of becoming a dating site.
It's so funny how many like failed dating sites there have been, but then they've turned into something magnificent afterward, right? But then I think for us, it was. I think there was 2 transformations. One of them was realizing dating's not going to work. People are not going to be uploading this. Let's make it more general. Let's make it so all forms of content can be uploaded. So that was after the first week, and we started seeing.
That's a pretty quick pivot, though.
It was, yeah. And then I think we started seeing a slow trickle that grew and grew over time of more people experimenting around with it. They had some videos that they wanted to share that they already had, and said, okay, finally now it's an easier way to do it than. Sometimes it would have been impossible because it was just too big to email or something. But it was a few months later when, like you mentioned, like the connection of the missing element with an auction service like eBay to have a payment service to be able to pay off the auction. We noticed that social networks, and the biggest one at the time was MySpace in 2005. It had a booming community that was very interactive. They were always sharing interesting content that they were finding back and forth. And one huge element, one huge vertical of that happens to be videos, but there were no ways to be able to share those videos. And so with YouTube, the 2 functions, to be able to upload that video, to be able to transcode it, and to be able to watch that video inside a browser, 1, that's important, and 2, the ability to be able to, at the bottom of every YouTube video, there is a, share this video with an embed link, and you can take that embed link.
So you had that even then?
And that was from day one, yeah. And so that ability allowed any MySpace user, but even outside of MySpace, it was every eBay, every like Craigslist, pretty much every service out there. If you wanted to embed a video other than just what people were used to at the time, text and photos, if you wanted to embed any video, you can take the embed link and put that into, and that was what really captivated people. I think what we saw as the typical behavior would be building that brand of YouTube early on. People would see and run across a few of these videos that were, first they would see the YouTube link with a YouTube video with a YouTube logo that was inside the video itself, and they would run across this multiple times, and then eventually, after 3, 4, 5 encountering that same YouTube logo over and over, they would actually click on the video. And when you do click on the video, you're no longer watching that video within MySpace, but it does take you to YouTube. And then it opened up this whole world of, here's all this other content, related content that's similar to this. And over a period of time, people started coming just directly into YouTube itself when they wanted to watch videos rather than doing something else. And so, it took a bit of time to get to, but definitely to be able to have a platform like MySpace was kind of that missing element of what that community was lacking, and they found YouTube was the perfect way to be able to plug that hole.
I feel like there's an element of chance in there. So when you're advising companies now or entrepreneurs now, how much do you want to mitigate that element of chance and instead have a very clear idea of where this can be used and how much it will be used, as opposed to hoping that it gets picked up?
Definitely chance, right? I mean, I think.
I guess there's a certain element of innovation too. Then, if you're saying, "Hey, this may be something that could work," as opposed to already servicing something that exists, it's a fine balance there.
It is I think that probably one of the biggest challenges, especially for the founders, the co-founders of the companies, is when to make. It's important to pivot, but I think even more important is when to pivot. It is knowing after a week went by, like, how did you know that the second week you may not get more personal dating videos? I mean, we
could have really taken off.
It could have, but then the other thing was, what to pivot on. There was this assumption that real-time video transcoding, being able to watch a video inside a browser without having to download the video, being able to embed that video onto a third-party site or your own website rather than having to come to YouTube. Those are the three key elements that were there from day one, and they still exist today.
Anywhere else.
And it didn't exist before then,
yeah.
But they were three elements that we thought were pretty core. So regardless of what the content type was, regardless of what the website was focused on targeting in terms of content creators of this specific genre of content, we thought those three elements we needed to keep within YouTube, regardless of what we did. But then we were very open to trying and evolving and trying different things, throwing whatever would stick on the wall. And so I think when it came to personals, but then there was a lot of stuff that was doing even like a little bit of video blogging back then that was starting to kind of take off. Like, do you want to go after that audience? And so all throughout that summer of 2005, it was a lot of experimentation and trying to tailor towards looking at possibilities where YouTube could be a fit, and then eventually finding MySpace as being the right fit in there. But along that way, there were a lot of excursions of, okay, let's try this, and let's try this. And I think that especially early stage, for early stage entrepreneurs, like, I think it's knowing what parts to keep with the product, what parts to retain from that initial version, but then not being so scared about trying different things as well. If this doesn't work, maybe you can do some small adaptations to it and then just see what works. And it's a small price to pay. If that didn't work, it's just another week of trying something else. If that didn't work, it's just another week of trying something else.
Well, one of the issues entrepreneurs run into is capital. Like, they may not have that luxury or space to keep trying until it hits something. You received several injections of capital early on, but you were also growing at a meteoric pace, and at the same time, it cost a lot due to the infrastructure you needed. Yet, despite having all that capital coming your way, you sold YouTube within the first 2 years. If it had been 2025, where I feel like where people understand what you're doing and what you'd been trying to do more, do you feel like you would have perhaps held out a bit more and tried to get more capital and tried to go on your own rather than partnering or selling to Google at the time?
Yeah, no, I think YouTube was Google's largest acquisition at the time of that acquisition in 2005, and I got to say, like, we were actually talking to Yahoo at the time, and if people can remember, like 2005, Yahoo was a much bigger company than Google back then in terms of market cap, and Google still just had one product. They did search really well, but most people, if you were to ask them in 2005 what was going to be the bigger company 10 years, 20 years from now, I think very few would have actually guessed the search engine versus the other app that we use for everything else, Yahoo at the time. And so I think it was a different period back then. In 2005 as well, it was just, I mean, I don't know if it's fair to say it was coming out of the dot-com crash era. I think we were still kind of in it. And so when
there definitely was wariness still.
Yeah, like I think when it came to fundraising, it was still very hard. I mean, when we closed that $3.5 million Series A funding round from Sequoia, like the numbers that we were already showing were meteoric rises, but that also meant that before then you had to self-fund this thing until you got to that point where you can actually show that there's definitely a lot of promising growth, that you were scaling and we were, for the key metrics that we cared about, for the number of views, the number of videos uploaded, number of new users created, those were all doubling every sort of 1.5 to 2 weeks. And those were the key metrics in terms of what Sequoia was looking for. But just to be able to sustain that for a number of months took a lot of just, personal credit card debt just to get to that point. And so I think that is still an important part, to be able to show that there is that level of growth and there's some concreteness to this idea that I think Silicon Valley is a very different place in 2025 compared to, say, 2005, with, again, the multiple generations of companies, the ultimate, like, almost cultural transformations that all these companies that have emerged from Silicon Valley has been able to create. And so I think the risk tolerance, especially in Silicon Valley, has gotten to be a lot lower than what it was in 2005 for people to want to write a check to even just sometimes like a prototype, sometimes an idea, much earlier than the phases that companies in that early period, as you were coming out of that dot-com crash, you had to really demonstrate that you had a product that was working, it was growing, and it was continuing to grow in accelerated growth. So I think it's a different time, but then I think there's also, it's going to be, I think, a very interesting next 2-3 years as we continue to see, like, with all the injection of capital from the major companies, from Meta, from Alphabet, Google, to many of the startup companies that are doing it. I mean, I think it's just the same way that the Internet 1.0 period, 2.0 period has transformed so many of the things that we considered and we've adopted as this is the conventional way to do something. AI in a matter of 24 months to 36 months has completely changed that around.
Yeah, it's just pulled the rug out of so many people and companies in the way we do things. And so, speaking of how AI has changed, it's also made it much easier and cheaper and easier to develop software. So do you think it makes it much easier or much more viable to launch a startup now? You don't need that outlay into, I guess, the human resources, the programmers, the Steve Chens so much.
I think so, for sure. But I think the question for me that I don't have the answer to, which is, are there going to be limitations, or are there going to be some areas of sort of boundaries or confinements in which there's still going to be a collaboration between the two, where AI, I hope, becomes a tool for productivity, to improve, to enhance productivity, to multiply productivity, to be able to get a prototype out in a matter of days versus weeks, to test out something in a matter of hours rather than days. I think that's certainly what we've already seen AI be able to do, and especially in Silicon Valley, do comprehensively and do very well, right? But it's only been a few years. Like, I wonder where this continues to take us, to the point where what's the role that the founders, co-founders, entrepreneurs of these companies are taking. I think there are so many interesting things that's coming out on almost like every week you see something new, right? And certainly every month you see something monumentally new, and it's coming from all different sectors. In my sort of career time in this technology space, I think we've seen how the internet itself has transformed all the conventional methods that we've done things to doing it now, being now on the internet. I think another one is definitely when the iPhone, when Apple, and when smartphone, when that became part of something that now everybody carries in our pockets, that we just have to even tell the kids, like, back in our day, like when we were growing up, like if we wanted to travel somewhere, you looked it up, I think, on the yellow pages on what the address was or something. You looked it up on maps and you figured out, I mean, you didn't just get in the car unprepared. As long as you have internet access now, you can just get in and you can do almost anything you want along the way. And it's a very different world, and it's all made possible through this one device that really only came out in like 2007, 2008, 2009, like not that long ago. And so I think that AI is certainly at that same level in terms of how transformative it is going to be in our daily disciplines and our daily practices.